you so much, Joel, for allowing me to start, and thank you for everybody being here. And most of all, thank you for all the panelists to join us here. Let me start for calling Madam Mercy Vanjau, the Secretary to the Cabinet of Kenya, on the stage. Then we have the Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy from Nigeria, Bozun Dijani, Minister. Then we have the Deputy Minister of Information, Communication and IT of the United Republic of Tanzania, Maripriska Winfried Mahundi. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia is already on stage, so everybody is here. Thank you for joining me. I also, before I start, want to recognize in the room the Minister of State and Head of the Civil House of President João Francisco Correia de Almeida from Angola. So thank you, and happy to see faces I just met. Mercy in Kenya, we had a very good meetings, but also colleagues who I haven't met before, so everybody very welcome in Tallinn. May I start with you, Mercy, to ask you that Kenya is known as Silicon Savannah, and it's very well known also for its M-Pesa payment solution. So, and you are a leader in e-government. I could be able to see that with my own eyes. So, would you tell us, just to warm up the audience right away, about the human-centric, citizen-centric solutions that you are developing in Kenya?
Great. Thank you very much, Marine, and good morning. M-Pesa, I think, is the one other thing we brought to the world, in addition to the marathon runners, in addition to the wildlife. And this really gave us a space as far as technology is concerned. The eCitizen platform is about 9-10 years old in Kenya. And at the beginning of last year, January, we were 397 services. But the commitment of the fifth administration was to bring on board about 5,000 services by 30th of June. And I'm pleased that through digital innovation, a lot of collaboration with the private sector, we were able to put up 5,087 services. This was so exciting. It was so dramatic in terms of the savings that it brought citizens. There was no more the requirement to stop day-to-day productive activities, travel to the capital city or to the county headquarters to obtain services, find a public servant is not present and be told, come back tomorrow, and then it leads to time delay. It was so dignifying that the head of state at that point said, you know, this is the right of access to each and every Kenyan. Access to government services in a dignified manner, in a cost-effective manner. So please put up 100% of the services by December 31st last year. That was official pressure. A lot of working night and day, burning the midnight candle. And this has introduced upwards of 18,000 services as we speak. And we're not quite done yet because we still need to go to the phase of quality assurance. What has this done for us? First, it's made us appreciate just the fantastic capability of data that gets generated from these kind of platforms that informs decision making with a measure of precision. It informs some kind of planning, and it's also introduced transparency. I would say we are still in the early stages, but we're on the right path, moving towards a space that a citizen will feel total control of their data and will be able to ask of government to provide other services that are not otherwise provided. I would say we're in exciting times, and we begin to see the entry of premium services, expedited services, and just even the place of private sector ideation and contribution to government to enable provision of quality services in a timely manner that are cost effective and the data that is generated from there enables us to look to the future with boldness, because you can see the trends. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what that will look like exactly.
Thank you so much. I would like to give everybody a first round of questions that everybody can intervene already, and then coming in with the second round of the questions. Risking losing my job, I leave the minister to the last. But I would like to ask Minister, Mr. Bozondijani, you are a successful entrepreneur yourself. So, and many of similar kind of people are sitting here in the room. So what would be your tips when Estonian companies would like to enter in African market, but more concretely, of course, Nigeria?
Thank you for that question. Good morning, everyone. I think the biggest tip, which you can verify by looking at the stories of many great entrepreneurs that have done business in Africa, is to understand that, and the Foreign Affairs Minister mentioned this, that you're looking at a continent that is the future of the world. That's just the reality, and it's not about being boastful. That is a continent of 70% of the people being extremely young people under the age of 30. In my country, Nigeria, is 60% of the population, and we're about 250 million people. 50% of that population is under the age of 25. And when you look around the world, you see a world where many countries have aging population, which means their population is declining over time. So there's actually no world where Africa isn't going to power the workforce of the future. There's absolutely no future where Africa doesn't have a role to play. And I think if you work in technology, I always ask people to use the analogy of a network. Yeah, if you think of a network, the value of a network is about how many nodes are connected to the network. And the contribution of each of those nodes, when you aggregate them, is how you measure the true value of a network. And we live in a world today that is extremely connected. There's absolutely no nation that is isolated. Every country in the world today is connected. A solution that is being built in the US has serious implications for Niger or Nigeria or Rwanda. So we're a connected world. So the future is such that Africa has a significant role to play. And it's not just the responsibility of Africa alone, but the entire world, to ensure that Africa is able to contribute its quota to the world. And for entrepreneurs, the journey that I took and the journey that most people have taken in Africa is understanding that it's not a market where you touch and go. If you have the mentality of truly being part of the economy, understanding the economy, building for the people, there's absolutely nowhere else to be in the world but Africa today. But Africa is not a place where you just go in to sell and leave. You have to go in, understand the people, understand the challenges, and understand how to build for the market. It's also an extremely pro-innovation market. I've lived my life in Europe for years as well. I lived in the UK extensively, walked across Europe, and I know that it's a lot easier for you to actually disrupt and create new things in a lot of African countries than you will in Europe because of the legacy infrastructure, systems, and institutions that exist here. But in Africa, we're just about building quite a number of these institutions, which means there's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to be part of it. Because as you know, government doesn't have what it takes to build everything. Like in Estonia, when we hear the story, we hear how much the private sector contributed to building the technology that is now the foundation upon which this country is thriving. And I think that's where Africa is today. We have a significant opportunity to help address a lot of the food insecurity challenges. If you come to my country, for instance, the current government is asking that we cultivate 500,000 hectares of land. And we recognize that we're not going to do that without the use of technology and science. It's absolutely going to be impossible to do that without technology. We're a country where within government, for instance, we have a very strong digital ID system where 90% of adults in Nigeria can be digitally identified. We have one of the best interbank settlement systems in Africa. This is often not spoken about. On that system alone, there's over 50 million people on that system. which is why the banking services in Nigeria is also one of the best in the world, not just in Africa. The only thing we lack, which is what excites us about Estonia, is our data exchange system. We currently apply technology in silos, not as a whole of government. And we've recognized that for us to truly leapfrog, there's opportunity for us to be able to connect the data that we generate across different government agencies, which is why we like what you've done with the X-Road in Estonia. We're hoping we can be inspired by that, and perhaps in the next few months, unleash the creativity of entrepreneurs to truly help build for Nigeria. Because once we're able to implement a data exchange system in our government, then you have a market where government is able to efficiently serve the people, because then we can serve people throughout what you may call life events, whether it's when you give birth to a child, when you do your marriage registration, when you sign up for school, when you create businesses. Government should be able to serve, and government can't do that alone, but we need to create the framework and infrastructure that will allow private businesses to build for us. So it's almost an invitation to all the entrepreneurs here that don't sleep on Africa. Don't sleep on Africa. It's not a place where you go to perhaps in 1 year that you start to see significant returns. It may look difficult when you look at it on the surface, but the more you start to understand the way business is done, the more you start to understand the leadership style, the more you start to see that there's no better place to be than the African continent.
Thank you so much, Minister. So excellent message. You go for a long-term relationship when you want to be serious doing business in Africa. Tanzania, as one of the previous speakers, but many other countries in Africa, is embracing digital transformation.
Yes.
So can you highlight the trends from the perspective on Tanzania in this regard?
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
For Tanzania, as the other African countries, for now we are about to implement the digital economy framework, and from this we are already some stages which we have undergone, and also for government is insisting at least to strategize on two main issues: the national interoperability, both using the X-Road technology through our MOU, which we are operating together with the Estonians. So this technology, we expect it is going to take us so far. And again, we are trying a lot to make sure that national digital identity number for citizens, we are going to work on it, so that we can make sure that all the areas which the digital economy can take us will bring us somewhere where we can see how we can communicate with other countries. Again, for Tanzania also, already the backbone network is working very well, and also we are proceeding doing it and see how it can work with other East African countries. Yes, and we are now preparing to launch our own satellite, which the Excellency Madam President is going to launch it soon, so that we can see that we can go further on digital economy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very good to hear about these developments in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Minister, you have been on both sides, being entrepreneur, being politician, being minister in different positions. So what is Estonia doing in accessing African markets? What can we offer, but also what can we learn?
Yes, I have this experience as well. I know how to pay taxes and how much actually we have to pay taxes in Estonia. But it is a good part of Europe. We are still paying so much as some other countries. But the case is, of course, for Estonian companies is the first thing to feel that your government is behind you. What can we do is that we are opening the doors, we are having high-level contacts. But it's not only the one meeting, and I totally agree with the minister from Nigeria that it takes years and years to learn for our companies how your societies are thinking, and also create the personal network and also trust. And this is something I know in Estonia that many companies can do that, they can afford that, but too many, they're not able to do it. And that's our duty as well as a government, with our diplomatical networks and representations, to support, not only open the doors, but also the way through all the process. Because it's not very easy from Estonia, as you know as well, with 1.3 million, not billion, 1.3 million people country, to be represented well and enough in this old huge continent. So this is something we have to deal with, and we are really looking forward the great honorable councils. We have our representative as well, Daniel, with the team there, Enterprise Estonia, also ESTEV, which is our agency for development cooperation. So we are trying to support our people and also creating these networks. It is a huge thing for us, really, that you're all here in Estonia, because you know, travel up to north, it's not very easy, and also Estonia is very poor about connections. But we must be present in the continent, because we have heard as well here that African people, African different states, they have made the decisions to move forward. And this is the biggest and the largest potential in the world. I mean, about the digitalization. So, and this is not only about technology, it's about as well the leadership. As we heard here, people had to work night and day because the president decided to move forward. So we have witnessed that as well in Estonia. One thing is the trust from people, because protection of data is a very delicate thing in the world, and mainly in the so-called old world in Europe. It's very hard for our companies to jump in with a new level of technology and services. But in African different countries, of course, there are like many differences, of course, because the continent is huge and many different nations. But there is a willingness to have a change, to have a better life. And there is a leadership, country by country as well, to make these decisions. Because the leadership is very, very important on that kind of reforms. So what can we do is to be together with you, together with our companies, not once, but all the way. Many of these projects are public-private partnership projects. It means as well the government to government together with the private sector. So that's what we are trying to do here. Sometimes we are lacking resources, human resources, I mean. And that's why we are creating now and establishing the network of honorable councils all over the Africa continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, next round. As we have in the audience lots of tech companies, and when I have been traveling or any other higher level visits, we always have great interest from the tech companies to come to Africa to see the developments there and to be part of it. So, from a perspective of Kenya, what is the attraction to come to Kenya for the tech companies?
There's plenty that Kenya has to offer. For one, like many other African countries, it is a young country. 75% of the population is below 35 years old and well educated and well spoken. What that means in the space of technology is that we lend agility and the ability to navigate concepts and aspects boldly, confidently, because we know that there are as many use cases as the utilities that a human being is engaged to on day-to-day level. So this has actually led us to focus very much on the front line on building of digital skills all the way from primary school. Coding has now, only from last year, been introduced as one of the core curriculum, where you find children are oriented to devices quite early and enabled to begin to code and to build up architectures from very early on. We then move on to the tertiary education, where there's a focus on STEM and an encouragement to focus on science and technology at the university level, at the technical level for the experiential learning. So what we are actually doing is gearing up to provide a mass market of the relevant skills from technical level all the way to the very, very highly skilled to bring to the world as a contribution. And we have seen this because the ecosystem now is shifting with the creation of the Kenya National Innovation Agency, which comes to partner with startups, because these are now beginning to really populate the business environment, to work with them and enable them to register within our environment, to find a space for incubation where they can be able to leverage the technical skills, the financing available, and the use cases that are open. So this has really oriented us very, very much, even within government, to take up a business development approach towards the world, because we do recognize that we have something to offer from our population in terms of the skill and the agility. This has really been very, very important for us as far as the ease of doing business is concerned. And in the last few years, Kenya is increasingly moving up that skill, because we do recognize that it's one thing to say that you're open for business, it's another to have an ecosystem that is actually supportive of embedding these new businesses coming in. And there has been a lot of move towards embracing the world through like the EU EPA. We signed on that just in March this year. The African Free Trade Agreement, the AFCFTA, is also one of the others. And we are aggressively moving to elimination of tariff and non-tariff barriers, so that this would then make it a preference, a preferable destination for trade. Looking at it, even from the digital side of things, we do recognize that while digital systems and platforms are great, they are only as strong as the security around them, as the minister has spoken about the issue of data and the importance of data, especially when it begins to cross boundaries. So increasingly, we are also taking a very frontline approach on aspects of cybersecurity, that even in trading with the data and in the information across boundaries in countries and across continents, we would also be able to assure you of the security of the data that we present you and you present us in order to make business happen. This, I believe, are exciting times, and we are looking forward to collaborating and engaging, so that when a business comes in and is willing to engage or even explore, that we would bring an open mind to the platform and see what value can be created from it, because we do know that I may have a good idea and the other party has a good idea, but when the two come together, the concept and the ideas that come out of that are surely superior and are likely to be more innovative and to lean more towards sustainability in the long term.
Thank you so much for very clear views and clear highlights of how and what to expect in Kenya. Similar question to you. So you've been moving from tech to the political sphere. In Estonia, is usually a bit different. First you go to politics and then you go to the private sector. And you spoke already about the possibilities and looking for interoperability platforms that enable to exchange the data that you have already, but from the wider perspective. So how do you streamline doing business in Nigeria for international companies?
Thank you. I think from top to bottom, within the government, there's clarity that if we look at technology specifically, that it has a significant role to play in helping us diversify our economy. Because Nigeria is an extremely blessed country, whether you're talking about mineral resources or opportunity to participate in agriculture, the talent. But we understand that you can't really maximize all those resources. You can't raise the level of technical efficiency if you don't bring technology to play. So what we've done as a government to really make the country a choice destination is actually to put a number of things in place. So the first thing is we are building the technology workforce that we believe can help businesses who come to do business in Nigeria to power their activities. So at the minute, we're running what we consider to be the largest technology talent accelerator in the world, where we're training 3 million technical talent in very high demand skills. And we're doing that across the country. This is a 3-year project that we started last year and is already looking exciting. We have the support of Google, Cisco, Meta is getting in on it as well. And the hope is that when we train these 3 million people, perhaps we can retain about half of them, but also Nigeria would like to be a net exporter of talent, like you've seen in India or China. We think that opportunity is there. Whether companies want to set up a large tech office in Nigeria, you can find the talent that you need, or you can actually take them away. The second thing we're doing is that we're reimagining our policies to ensure that our policies are more pro-innovation and pro-business. Because in government, it's one thing to have policies in place, it's another thing for those policies to actually support innovation. And you've already seen the example in what we've done with artificial intelligence. So we're not just approaching AI by saying it's not something for the developing country. We actually brought in about 120 experts from all over the world. So we use an AI model to find some of the best people of Nigerian descent all over the world who work in AI, and we brought them to Abuja for a week. And they've crafted the artificial intelligence strategy for Nigeria, the framework of it. So we're now going to release that strategy to the world for people to feedback. And the idea is that we recognize that AI is moving so fast. For people to be able to do business in Nigeria, there will be need for the environment to be able to support the use of artificial intelligence, whether in raising productivity or generally in creating new products. So we've also, as a country, we've invested in compute power. So we're expecting to have our own GPUs, which again is only a few countries in Africa with that. We've launched the first large language models, taking some of the languages in Nigeria. We have 3 languages that are spoken by millions of people. So Yoruba, which I speak, is spoken by over 40 million. Hausa, which is a language that cut across a few African countries, also about 35, 40 million people. Then same for Igbo as well. So we think it's important to help enrich the quality of AI by building that body of large language models. So that's something we've also done. And we're taking the same approach for UAV, for instance, drones in agriculture, but also for security. We want to ensure we have the policies that can allow companies to come and actually set up in the country. The other thing we're doing at the minute is investing in the backbone for connectivity, which is a fiber optic network. As a country, we already have 8 submarine cables, which I think is, again, one of the largest on the continent, sitting on our shores. But we need to take those cables inroad. And to do that, we need to invest in additional 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic network. So this is something that we've launched. The cabinet has approved for us to secure a $2 billion loan to be able to lay that fiber across the country. And we think once we do that, the size of our digital economy will grow significantly, because it means that both rural and urban area will be fully connected with quality internet in Nigeria. The other thing that may be of interest to those who are looking to set up, of course, we do have the Nigerian satellite. It's the only satellite in West Africa that is owned by a government. Starlink's biggest market is Nigeria. Amazon Kuiper is also just given license. They're also coming to Nigeria as well. So the satellite market is also a thriving place, and the government is going to invest in a new satellite with bigger and better capabilities as well. In terms of infrastructure for business, it's also important to note that we have a very vibrant postal network, and we're changing the model for the postal network for them to also be able to support the digital economy, which means you can move goods around easily within the country. And lastly, is we're setting up a new trade desk for technologies, specifically for technology. And that trade desk is being attached again to something that we call the Startup House in San Francisco. So Nigeria is now going to launch a Startup House in San Francisco to connect the tech community, the investors, to what is happening in Nigeria, but hopefully that will become a model that will try in other continents as well. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I see lots of opportunities here to work together for a wide variety of companies. But as talked and addressed before, is that it's important to collaborate and work together. So Tanzania is also having the headquarters of East Africa Community.
Yeah.
When you look from that perspective of regional approaches and leveraging technologies for growth, how do you see that?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. For Tanzania, as the headquarters for East African countries, we do communicate and collaborate so closely so that we can work on pillars which will integrate and make sure that can take us somewhere into digital. Now, for now, we are working on customs union, which helps us into taxations, which we will have the same idea, and also we have the common market in trading as the East African countries now in Arusha. Arusha is where it is situated as the headquarters for East African community. But also we are working on monetary union. We are still discussing on how it can work. And for this, my colleague whom I've moved with, you can give him 1 minute, can tell it in detail. He's so good in this for the East African. He's the director who is working well on this. Maybe please 1 minute for him.
Maybe we can do that, and Moses, you could stand up and show everybody who you are, so everybody can approach you later. That have more concrete question, if that's okay for you, as we are rather strict on our time scheduling.
Okay.
But thank you so much, because the regional component in cooperation, when you talk about digitalization and developing the digital economy, is really important. We have learned that in Europe the same way, sometimes maybe a hard way. But Minister, back to you. You have the last opportunity to bring in the two sides. Estonia works with Africa in development cooperation, but also looking for business. So how Estonia is putting that together, how are the synergies created, and it's part of it's also helping the African ecosystems to grow. So what is your perspective and view?
Indeed, it's not good enough that only government is dealing with that, and under the foreign ministry we have this agency, ESTEB, Development Cooperation Agency, but also Estonia is a part of European Union, so we have one of the leading country in this organization as European Union. So we are the gateway as well to Europe and from Europe. So we are working a lot together with the different funds of Europe, European Union, and also the World Bank and all the other international organizations and institutions, because we have trust. Because they trust us, our companies, and also our government and the public sector, about the private and public cooperation. We have done a lot, different projects and huge projects with them. So this is something as well to keep in mind, that we are not only cooperating with the small Estonia, 1.3 million people, but actually we are representatives of the most wealthiest, I can say, organization or institution as European Union. And as you know as well, we have the NATO Cyber Defense Center located to Estonia. We have also the European Union Digital Center located physically to Estonia. So this is something what we are. So we are not only the small, well-developed country about digitalization from north, but also behind us, actually there is a great power which is trusting us as well. So, but we were talking about the leadership and also about the fears of people. And what we have experienced as well today, we have to explain that one thing is to give data, and the principle what we have in Estonia, and it has been developed together with the private sector. I'm always repeatedly say it's all the private sector developments, not the public sector, because private sector is hungry, private sector is innovative, private sector is counting money, public sector is not sometimes. Even I know that many officials here are saying that no, we are counting money as well. Of course, but as a principle in the system is different, because private sector must be efficient, and private sector having competition in the market, and they must be innovative. But we can support that. But the case is in Estonia, we have a principle about the data. It's a once only, that people only giving once the data to the system, to the services. And the second is that this data belongs to people. So actually we are not taking away the right of the data, and people can actually check who is using the data and why and what purpose publicly. That's one thing. But about protection, about the security of the data. I'm just for the end giving you an example. because we are locating geographically in a very difficult position. We are a neighbor of Russia, which is very aggressive. So we are under the constant cyber attacks from Russia, constantly. Sometimes more than 100 different attacks within 24 hours. Not public sector only, but the private, the banking and the energy and all, even the small companies. So this is the ecosystem we have created as well. Not from the defense ministry, not from the Ministry of Interior, but the case is that it's like the part of the society as well. This is something we can be partners. But as an example about these cyber attacks, just a couple of months ago, we had the largest historical attack from Russia. Can you imagine? Of course you can, because you're experts. Within 4 hours, we got more than 3 billion, not million, but billion unlawful requests against our government domain when we are running most of our public services. So even US was, amazed about this kind of attack, 3 billion. And we managed it, not easily, but we did it without any harm. And all this, thank you. But what I wanted to say you as well is, one is to create an ecosystem, geographical services, go online and digitalized, but we have to protect as well today. I'm not talking only about Russia, I'm talking about the private hackers, I'm talking about, very much what is going on. So I think that Estonia is one of the best countries in the world about that as well. So focus on the protection of the data as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for giving this kind of sad but also good example. What we
It was a great example.
A great example, indeed. But also thank you for all the panelists, and please give a round of applause to all the panelists. And I grasped from this messages that actually there's a wide variety, very similar challenges, but also opportunities to work together. So thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
To be honest with you, this time around has been a very fruitful, I think, trip. It's my 4th time here in Kenya, and I have experienced a good welcoming party when it comes to all the companies I met. And since I'm more familiar with the country and this culture, it was a lot more rewarding this time around.
I think it's a great trade mission. I like that it actually has broken down between the larger event, which was the summit, the B2B engagements, which have been taking place today, and then the follow-up or in-person meetings at different business premises in the remaining days. So it's, I think it's a well laid out plan.
I think it was, in many senses, a very eye-opening experience. It exposed us to various public authorities and companies in Kenya. It definitely provided us perspective in what's currently happening in the digital transformation space in Kenya, both in private and public sector. And this is the knowledge that we will be using in further exploring our opportunities and building our business in Kenya.
It is our 2nd trade mission to Kenya, and we are here with Triumph Health to build resilience among children. So it's really a great pleasure and an honor to be part of the trade mission. And we have really great companies here and really great meetings and a lot of progress happening.
I think like key learnings is, come prepare. And this is also would be my advice to future participants. Come prepare, do your homework, understand what authorities you want to meet, understand the scope of responsibility of those authorities, and do the mapping of your service and the product offering to the objectives and the scope of responsibilities of your potential customers.
Come ready to engage, but know that it's a long-term process. It's not the first meeting will lead you to all the business you wish to have.
Since our field is mental health, that the timing is really right. So this is the main learning point for us at this time, to know that we cannot wait in order to make an impact here in Kenya.
I think the most important thing that I've learned or experienced here at this trip around was the willingness for the Kenyan people to actually embrace technology and look into the future of digitalization.
Okay, so just a quick brief around that video. So usually under Trade Estonia or Enterprise Estonia, we organize trade missions to different countries. This was the last trade mission last month to Nairobi, and the companies happened to meet partners. They were able to interact, find out about the market and what the market needs. So this is one of the things we do as Team Estonia, which is a collaboration between Enterprise Estonia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, SDEV, and everyone in that ecosystem around Africa. So if you want more information, let me know, and I'll be able to share with you a bit about that. Moving on quickly to the next panel, and I'll invite Kadi to come and invite her panelists. And as Kadi comes, Kadi has also been to Nairobi. At least she came when there was no flooding. So I don't know, what was your experience in Nairobi?
Well, it was a nice break from Estonian autumn, first of all. It was in September. It was already rainy and cold here, so it was a lot of warmth to go through winter. But yeah, in Kenya, I met a lot of clean tech entrepreneurs and some support organizations there. It was really insightful to see what are the trends there. And I hope with the panel we can delve into that now. So I will call to the stage first, please, Nancy. So Nancy is working for the Moi University and is a textile researcher. Please have a seat. Welcome. Then we have Marem with us, who is the lead African 500 Global. And we will hear more about what you're doing at 500 Global. Thank you for coming and joining us. And then we have Robin, who is from eAgronom, which is an Estonian company working in different African countries. Welcome, Robin, as well. Thank you. But before we go into our panel discussion, we have someone joining us online. So it's Ariane Labat, who is working for the European Commission. She is the head of unit for science, technology, innovation, and digitalization. And let's hear what she has to say for the panel.
Good day, colleagues. It's my great pleasure to join you online for this very interesting panel. Thank you again for the organizer of the Africa Business Forum in Tallinn 2024. I'm sorry I couldn't join in person, but nonetheless I will offer you some thoughts coming from DG International Partnership, Science, Technology, Innovation and Digitalization Unit. Clean tech as a shared ambition definitely is an exciting topic for the panel. So from our side, from Team Europe side, let me offer you 3 examples how we invest and believe in international cooperation, in driving innovation together, and in supporting a global twin transition that works for people and leaves no one behind. First, why we want to do this. We know there is a global infrastructure gap, infrastructure investment gap, and particularly in Africa. This is what our leaders ask us to look into, to bridge this gap with innovative approaches and innovative partnerships. From the European side, our value proposition to address this infrastructure gap is to work through Global Gateway offer for partnership. The Global Gateway offer is really focused on the priorities set by the Africa-EU leaders, namely digital transition, transport connectivity, climate and energy, and also mainstreaming education and research throughout everything we do, plus health also, of course, sorry. So this is really our philosophy. We are coming together, the European Union, the member state like Estonia, who is welcoming us today, and we are coming as public sector together with our businesses, our financial institutions, and more broadly our civil society and academia. We are coming to work together with African partners on partnership that makes a difference, that have an impact on the ground, to build faster, better, some key infrastructure. Some examples, as I promised. First example, we invest into developing the Digital Green Innovation Initiative together with member states. This is an initiative that we are busy designing, preparing contracts, but in the spirit. And very, very soon on the ground, it will be an initiative to develop smart innovation on the ground through SME boost, through hackathons, and really betting on the green and digital technology of future, as well as greening the digital sector. Secondly, we invest in the European programs for space, both Earth observation and satellite navigation. And these programs are heavily invested in as well as regards the use cases in Africa and building the capacities through the AUC of the local partners to use these different space capabilities. This is definitely already used by some of you to manage your forests, your inland waterways transport, to manage your fleet of renewable energy and your future investment in this space. We really layer the strength of the European assets, the Copernicus system, GMES for Africa, and through that we develop together with you some partnership to roll out more services, more innovation locally. Thirdly, we as Team Europe, we believe a lot in bridging the digital divide, because that's a way to leapfrog multiple other sectors of the economies in Africa to faster growth, to greater prosperity. We do that in partnership with our African partners to really invest in key connectivity links, be it subsea cables or last mile innovation. And when we do that, we have definitely an approach that is sustainable, meaning we look at the twin transition opportunities and we look into investing into infrastructure that are energy efficient and clean. and in turn unlocking some local services that are needed for clean tech business to grow. These are just snapshots into what we are doing and what we want to do more and more with African partners. I look forward to meeting you in person to multiple other events, and I'm again very thankful to the organizer of the Africa Business Forum in Tallinn to allow me to be with you indirectly. Thank you.
Thanks to Ariane for this introduction. But without further ado, let's dive into how one can do or build sustainable business, a sustainable economy, really, in Africa. Let's look at what our panelists are doing in this field. Let's start with you, perhaps, Marem. Can you tell us what you're doing at 500 Global and how is it relating to a sustainable economy?
Sure. So 500 Global is a primarily US-based venture capital fund. We started in Silicon Valley. Now it's been about 14 years ago. And our focus as a venture capital firm is how do we invest in sustainable companies across the globe? And when we say sustainable, first, that means two things. Sustainable financially, so companies that are able to actually generate sustainable profit, as well as sustainable in terms of the positive contribution to the ecosystem. So today, we primarily invest in about 88 countries across the globe. Our focus on emerging markets makes it so that we come across companies in climate and sustainability quite often. And that is because today what we're especially realizing in some of these markets is that sustainability really is a complementary effect to profitability. And even if you want to find profitable businesses, a lot of the ones that are successful are the ones that can be sustainable over the long term.
Can you tell us, is it possible to invest, make returns, and for it to be sustainable?
That's what we get paid for.
Awesome. But Nancy, can you tell us what you're doing? So you're a textile researcher at Moi University. What do you do, and what is your relation to sustainability in your job?
Okay, thank you. At Moi University, we do a lot of research around sustainability in the area of textile and fashion. First, at the research stage, we encourage the students to do research that incorporates green technologies. So even if it's textile surface modification or anything related to that, we encourage the use of green methods like plant extracts and any other techniques that don't pollute the environment. And then now also extending to other projects that we have. We have a project which works with textile firms to encourage them to incorporate eco-innovation strategies in their manufacturing. You see, textiles pollutes, it's one of the largest polluters globally. So for us to be able to ensure that we reduce that, we are working with with small to medium companies to guide them on how they can incorporate eco-innovation strategies in their businesses. And then we also have another project that we are working with the Estonia Academy of Arts. This one now is on transferring up-made knowledge to Kenya. So we are working with the Estonia Academy of Arts as well as the Stockholm Environment Institute in Tallinn. So in that project now, we are encouraging the upcycling of post-industrial waste. So we get expertise from ECA. They come to Kenya, they train us, and then we are also working with a company that is linked to Moi University, Rivertex. So we are using that post-industrial waste to be able to come up with products to add value to that post-industrial waste. And then in that line also, yeah, there's a lot. We've even had students coming from ECA to come and do some designs and train people at Rivertex on how to be able to add value to that. So there's a lot of sustainability going around.
It's great to hear this. Not only research, but you're working on real projects that come to the real economy. So it's not only on paper. Yes. It becomes a reality.
Yes.
Robin, so you're an Estonian entrepreneur. What are you doing in this panel first? But tell us about what is your sustainable solution, and what are you doing in African countries?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my name is Robin, and I'm coming from the farming family. So my father has 1,400 hectare organic grain farm, and my grandfather has same-sized conventional grain farm. So all my life I have been raised in the middle of those two worlds. But I ended up studying computer science, and then in 2016, my father needed a tool to manage our family farm. And since we didn't have anything good on the market at the time, I ended up building something for only our family farm. And then other farmers said that they want to start using it as well. And next thing you know, we have, well, today more than 2 million hectares managed with this tool. Now, about the sustainability and Africa. In the beginning, it was really a farm management tool. But already in the very first prototype, we had something called humus balance calculator. So humus is the richest part of the soil, and half of humus is carbon. And we had no business idea behind this or anything. We just wanted to communicate to farmers that every decision that they take also is influencing their soil. And then fast forward to, I think it was something like 2021, when we already had many farmers on board. We were looking for the next step for our company. And some companies, other big corporations, started approaching us saying that, hey, they have done a lot to reduce their emissions, but it's impossible to reach to zero emissions, and they want to compensate for the emissions that are left. And since we work with farmers, maybe we can figure something out. Farmers changing practices, storing more carbon in the soil, and they can kind of sponsor this activity. So we ended up launching our initially carbon offsetting program in 2021 summer, where farmers are changing practices, storing more carbon in the soil, and companies compensating, corporations compensating their emissions by supporting those farmers. But then soon we've realized, first of all, that it's way more than offsetting. So we work with food companies to help them to reduce emissions in their value chain. We work with banks to help them to give out green loans to farmers who apply sustainable practices. And then, I wanted to say recently, but it's certainly more than a year ago, we entered also African market. So we're working with around 200,000 landowners in Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, and want to continue working with African farmers to improve soils in their countries, and also at the same time helping to, well, slow down the climate change as much as we can by storing more carbon in the soil.
It's good to hear. So we're really able to cover quite a few African countries, so we don't have to stick to one. I would really like to know, what are the past years' trends that you see? Perhaps, Marem, you can look at it from an investor's perspective. What has happened in the clean tech entrepreneurship or companies in Africa?
So when we look at the continent today, and I think it's important to now see that there is now a positive excitement around bringing in new technologies on the continent today in a way that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So today, if you look at especially the bigger markets, which are obviously, when we talk about the big four, it includes Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, and Kenya. From a technology perspective, I think the most excitement across the board is definitely now in agri-tech. And I think agri-tech, because we've been talking about for the last years the importance for the continent to reach food production sustainability. And not only the importance for the continent to reach that, but also the continent's ability to do so. And so agri-tech, especially when we look at the founders today, the excitement and engagement we're seeing around agri-tech is nothing like any other sector. When we look at our pipeline, especially in some of those markets, we see a growth in companies that are building either sustainable solutions for farming, even now more so also contributing to financing farming, and also thinking about IoT as a predominant way to create basically clean farming. So on the agri-tech space, I think that from an investment perspective, it's something that we're seeing, but there is another interesting layer to that also comes around mobility. And mobility because, as some of you know, the continent has its fair share of challenges around mobility. And when we've talked about the position of clean tech within mobility, that used to be a completely foreign concept altogether. And when we see the pipeline of companies that we have today, we are now increasingly seeing that EV is becoming actually a topic on the continent. We're also seeing that batteries and battery production is also becoming a tech topic. But ultimately, I think for us, especially from an investor perspective, we really believe in the fact that innovation is driven by the interests of founders. So we don't force certain sectors or thesis on founders, because entrepreneurship is hard enough that it's important that founders are building something that they believe in and something that they're truly passionate and interested about. And so what we do from a trend perspective is we follow the founders. Where are the founders going to? Where are their interests in terms of these technologies? Where are their skills and their ability to develop? And that's how we define those trends.
Thank you very much. But now looking maybe more precisely in the textile sector, Nancy, what do you see talking to people? Do the people in Kenya, do they care about sustainability in the textile sector? And do people see the economic opportunities in there, be it for a job opportunity, be it for creating a company, for investing in it? Is it seen as an opportunity or more like an obligation, something we have to do?
Okay, thank you. In Kenya, like across the value chain, there's been interest in sustainability. We can start with for example, fiber stage, cotton growing. Now there's an interest on organic farming so that it becomes more environmentally friendly. Although it's a bit ambitious, because as much as it's environmentally friendly, it may not be necessarily economically viable for the farmers. So in that area, yes, there might be a lot of interest, but then is it really completely sustainable? And then when we move now to the companies, there is a lot of interest, especially in renewable energy sources for manufacture, particularly solar energy, because of the challenges with the cost of electricity and also because of the abundant sunlight that they can take advantage of. But the same scenario again comes in the cost of setup of those renewable energy methods. So as much as there is a lot of interest in the sustainability, is it completely viable right now? You know, if we are being realistic and we are really saying, do we want it to be, do we want to move that direction? What do we need to do to ensure that even as we are doing all these practices, everyone is benefiting across the value chain? So that's one thing. And then in terms of eco-innovation strategies, besides the renewable energy, we are also considering looking at areas of recycling, upcycling, the use of recycled fibers from the beginning, which also brings us again to the same problem, like now getting something that is completely sustainable, that will have good social impact, economic impact, and environmental impact is still a bit of a challenge right now, but the interest is there.
It's very good to know. So there is interest, but like everywhere else, I think the same question we ask ourselves in Estonia is it just? Is it approachable to everyone? And can, because otherwise we can't do it, right? Yes. On scale at least. But Robin, looking at your some years of experience in African countries, what have you seen change? And given that you're also in a quite regulated area of business, how have you seen the national objectives and regulation evolve in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think the biggest change has been in my own mindset, actually. But because, well, seeing in the beginning going to Africa, thinking that it's quite difficult to get farmers to adopt some change, adopt more sustainable soil-friendly practices. But the truth is actually that it's even more difficult for us to promote these practices in Europe. Because it seems almost like African farmers feel the climate change more than European farmers. And also improving the soils is improving their production more compared to Europe as well. So warm climate, there is enough moisture, well, depending on the region, but where we operate, so it's fairly fast. The soil regeneration happens really fairly fast, and can already quickly give some productivity gains to African farmers as well. And that's the biggest change for, in our mindset at e-agronomy, is that we see that it's not only the carbon income that we are bringing to farmers, but it's mainly helping them to increase their yields and making more stable if there are extreme weather conditions. For example, there is long dry periods, and etc. That has been the biggest change that we have seen.
Well, that's very good to hear. Maybe I will come back a bit to the financial perspective of things. So we see that there is a wish and drive to build the green economy, but there are definitely a lot of challenges. So from a financing perspective, what are the main barriers holding back the development of a sustainable economy right now in Africa?
I think the first thing we observe in a lot of the businesses that are more green tech affiliated on the continent today is that a lot of them are, especially today, they are basically relying on government subsidies to be able to survive. And that's a big, big issue around creating these businesses to be sustainable. Because especially on the continent, we see that there is a lot of instability around governments. And so the companies that rely on these subsidies, I mean, we see a lot of them who basically can be out of business over a day or another because they don't currently have the business model that allow these companies to be reliable outside of these government subsidies. So I think that's definitely one of the first challenges. The second one is that we actually don't, when we think about the capital pool, we mix up equity investment as being the primary driver of sustainable technology. So when we think about the capital that these companies need, we think that all of it has to come from investors. But that's not true. The reality is that the capital really has to be divided in three pools. The first pool is the R&D pool, which is the research and development capital that they need to actually be able to figure out how the technology works. And that allows them to have the time to do the research, the time to do tests, the time to actually be able to produce something that can go on the market. And then you have the second part, which is the equity capital, which comes from investors like ourselves who believe in their technology and are funding them in order for them to take it out to market. And then you now have the third part of the capital pool, which is the working capital. And that's the debt and basically the loan part, which is the working capital that they now need to start scaling and inject more capital to get their products out. So if you think about those three buckets, one, on the continent today, obviously all three are very low in terms of their availability. Number one, which is R&D, is even lower, probably non-existent in a lot of markets. And then number three is very, very difficult to access for them because banks are not going to give them those loans or those debt packages. So today, the reality is that even though some of their technologies might be sustainable, on the financial part, it's not. And until we can figure out a way to make it financially sustainable, we are actually not bringing any value back to the continent. And that's the harsh truth, but it is the truth. Because if the farmers, if the business owners, if the employees are not actually able to make a living from the technologies that they're putting out in these markets, then are we actually solving for them, or are we solving from a perspective of an idea instead of reality?
It's very interesting. Actually, I would like to hear what Nancy has to think about it, because if financing R&D is one of the main barriers, yet you manage to do it. And I hear that you have partnerships with the Estonian university, but probably with more global universities and more European research institutions. How does this collaboration help you? In what ways? Is it access to financial resources? Is it access to experience? What do these collaborations give you?
First, of course, is the financial aspect. So you find most of what we do in the universities, we apply for research grants from large organizations that offer funding for that. But also within that collaboration, there is knowledge transfer. So between two parties, we gain knowledge from them, they also gain knowledge from them, and then there's also strengthening of relationships. So as much as the financial aspect is important, but then also the additional knowledge that we gain from that. And also even in terms of research, some institutions have got resources that we don't have. So when we need equipment for certain aspects, then we can work with other institutions. And then we also have some resources that those institutions don't have. So some people can come to Kenya because they need a particular plant for some green technology that they're doing. And then we take that plant back to their lab, we do the research from that side, and at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everyone.
That's very good to hear. And Robin, of course, you're looking at the barriers I guess you would like to expand your activities and your partnerships in African countries. What would help you go even further? Is it some sort of bilateral agreements between countries or multilateral? What is holding back and what could be done to improve your business development?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, what helped us to get started in the first was also Estonian government, Estonian Climate Ministry subsidy to enter Tanzania. And the main thing was that when we speak to venture capital funds, mainly in Europe, then they like our expansions in Spain or in Poland or in Sweden. But always if they see that, oh, you're expanding in Africa as well, they see this as a risk and don't want to necessarily to put their money on the table on that. So this grant helped us to get started and to prove that we can do sustainable business and profitable business in Africa. But what will help us to go further is that, well, beside our own activities, is to have a stable business environment. Obviously, at the same time, we need changes, we need the progress and so on, but some fundamentals should stay the same, and there should be this kind of stability to operate in the region.
Very interesting. I'm looking at the time that's running dangerously fast as always. It's been very interesting talking to you, and I've really gained that insight to where the barriers are, what we could be doing to kind of alleviate them. But maybe just to, before we end, what would be your wish, if you had one wish to make for the sustainable economy development in Africa in the coming years? What's your wish? Who wants to start?
Okay, I can start. Mine is more, of course, there's been a lot of education and awareness to everyone, but then I feel like it's more around the people who understand the language of sustainability. Previous speakers have talked about the barriers in language and communication, so I wish that we could go deeper and access everyone from whatever level they are at. Because now there's a lot of talk about the expanded producer responsibility, but I wish it could also go all the way to expanded consumer responsibility. And the consumers are the people out there, the ones that don't really fully understand this language of sustainability. So we can do a lot of work from our level, but if we don't reach out to the grassroots, to the communities down there, then we won't make much progress. That's my wish. Thank you.
Thank you.
My wish would be for these businesses and these models to be financially sustainable. I think it's incredibly important that we think about the communities and the grassroots members who are the ones who are on the receiving end of a lot of the work that we do. And if those people are not able to make a living from some of these directions, policies, innovations that we're putting out in the market, then for me, we're missing the point. So it's really for us to go back to those who are at the bottom chain and create value for them.
Thank you, Mariam.
In Kenya, we met a farmer. Well, he's a farmer, but he has every week group of farmers visiting his farm and center, where he's showing about practices that help to reduce the cost of fertilizers, helps to produce food more sustainably, in the sense that the yield is more stable. And I just hope that we will find a way to scale these kinds of operations all around, well, Kenya and then abroad as well. His work is amazing.
Thank you, dear panelists, for this amazing discussion we had. And I really have hope and faith as well after this panel that the sustainable economy in Africa and in partnerships between African and European countries in Estonia are going to get even faster and bigger in the coming years. Thank you so much. And thank you for the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kadi, please receive a token of appreciation. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
Sustainability is what we're looking at. I think in Africa, in Kenya, from my experiences, you try many things, very many times, but things don't work out and you give up so quickly. So I hope the audience now know that you have to take time, get things done. And Robin, we've seen what you can do. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Right, our photo. Thank you. Right, so best part of the day, lunch. So as you gave me a hard time during the coffee break, until I had to get Daniel to project his voice for you to come back, lunch will not be that simple. If you don't move, I just take your plate away. Fair? So it's 12:30. I want us back into the room by 1:45 because the next session is starting at 2 p.m. and I want us to keep time so that we also have enough time for the breakout sessions. So, hey, come down, guys. Oh, I think that group knows where the lunch is. So, the lunch is downstairs at the restaurant. So, it's a buffet, self-service. So, pick something, sit down, meet someone new, come back with a new business card, and let's meet here at 1:45. Thank you, everyone. You want the water? Right. So good afternoon and welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch.
Let's press this.
I saw some people going for 4 rounds of dessert. So hopefully we keep it going enough. The next panel is around startups, which is a very exciting conversation. I think, especially for Africa, we're looking at startups and where that can go because that's where the majority of our people are. So Hannah and Tim, I hope you will give us exciting news that there's enough funding from this table to give everyone in the startup ecosystem. But before I start, Hannah, you know I always have to put you on the spot. Which is your best African country? Oh. And good luck because you might be lynched after this, so good luck with your answer.
We're watching you. Oh no, well, I'm wearing a shirt that I got in Makala Market in Ghana, so I think I have to say Ghana. But it sounds like I'm in trouble already, so...
So I think for all the Africans in the room,
for that warm introduction.
Yeah, no, I was going to get something for you. So all the Africans in the room, if you want Hannah to be your favorite, please give her a piece of clothing by the end of this day. So Hannah, take it away. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many people excited about startups and here to listen to our talk today. My name is Hannah Swaby. I have 7 years of mobility experience in startups in Estonia. I've worked all over the African continent. This is a subject that I am very passionate about, and so is our amazing panel that we have here for you today. I would like to start by letting the panel introduce themselves to you, because I think in their own words they can put it the best. But I would challenge the panelists to tell us not only who you are, what you do for work, whereabouts on the continent you're located, but also what is your connection to Estonia and what actually brought you here today. So maybe we can start down at the far end.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Much better. Thank you very much. My name is Caroline Wanjihia. I'm Kenyan by birth. African by, maybe origin, but also Estonian by profession. Why do I say Estonian by profession? Lovely. I'm the regional director for Bolts in Africa and the international markets. So this is my home headquarters. And as you can see, or for those of you who may not know, I'm wearing the colors of the Estonian flag. So welcome to the home of Bolt. For those of you who may not have tried Bolt, please try it. We've got a variety of services for you to try. The Bolt ride, there's a Bolt micromobility for some of you who like, using their bikes around. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you. Thank you.
Nice. My name's Caleb. I am Australian Ethiopian by origin. I guess living in Kenya, in Nairobi, same as Caroline. And I guess dress code Estonian too. So that's like my one claim to Estonia, unfortunately not by profession. But I'm the CEO of a company called Tech Safari. I've been operating across Africa for the last 6 years. But started Tech Safari about a year ago, really covering what's happening in tech across Africa. And through that, looking at how do we get the rest of the world engaged with what's happening in the continent. And that's how I met a lot of the folks in the room, Daniel, and many others who have sort of connected me to Estonia. Alongside Tech Safari, within that, we found that there's a lot of need for companies that want to expand to the continent. There's a few companies here that have headquarters here, but now have expanded. Bolt is one. There's many here who want to do the same. And so along developing that sort of agency that helps these companies expand onto the continent, we came across Latitude, and they hosted their first spin-off of Latitude 59 in Kenya in December last year. We were joined by a few of the folks here. It was a fantastic event, and we hosted them and helped them sort of launch into Kenya. And so that's my first connection with Estonia. Yeah, sure, let's hear it. Latitude is a fantastic conference. And so far I've just been loving it. It's been a fantastic time. I went to a swamp the other day. It's a very surreal place, I think, coming from Kenya. So it's been a great time so far.
Hi everyone, my name is Aziza. I'm Tunisian, based in Tunis, and I'm part of Brighter Bridges. And Brighter, actually, it's a data and market intelligence company. What we do is that we provide data, insights, and intelligence on emerging markets, specifically on Africa, because we believe that there is a knowledge gap when it comes to data on the innovation investment scene in Africa, and our mission is to kind of build the knowledge infrastructure in order for us to stimulate innovation investment on the continent. And actually, we connected with Estonia through the work that Daniel has been doing in building bridges with the continent and also with the Latitude team. So actually, we also worked with them last year for the Kenya edition in Africa, and we'll be collaborating for sure for this year. So I hope to see you all in Kenya. Thank you.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Chidi, and I am Nigerian. Also, I call myself a true Pan-African because I don't have a base. I just show up wherever they need me, and I'm there on the continent. But I do live in Atlanta. What I do, so right behind me it says I'm a managing principal, of Red Cola. Red Cola is a product management consulting and coaching agency. And I coach entrepreneurs, I coach CPOs, CEOs on building products that their customers love. But that's also translated. I think earlier they were talking about ALU. So all the ALU people that you saw today, those are my people. Those are public sector leaders across the continent that are here this week to immerse with the Estonian ecosystem. So Ambassador Daniel is one of our hosts. We're here to also attend Latitude 59, and I'm one of the faculty, that teaches, that's actually trying to get our public sector leaders to become product people, right? Because it's not just the private sector, right? The public sector also, we need to deliver products that our citizens love and need. So that's the connection with Estonia. We've been coming here, this is our second time to come here. And I was also at Latitude 59 in Kenya, which was awesome. And so let's talk.
It's a fantastic mix of different experiences and different geographies, and I think we're really lucky to have such a diverse panel today to be able to discuss these topics with. I want to dive right into the core of it, which is Africa is a huge continent, 54 different countries. I think one of the things that comes up is just how does a startup even decide where to start? How do you pick that first market if you want to enter into the continent? Carolyn, I'm going to look at you. Bolt's operating in over 45 different countries. I mean, not all on the continent, but I think you have some incredible experience on expansion and growth. So maybe you can start by talking a little bit about how do you pick a market and how do you get started?
Okay. So in Africa, we started in around 2016. And in fact, our first market to launch was South Africa. Now, what were we looking at? At the time when we looked at, what the economists and statisticians were telling us in terms of urban population, this was going to double, say till 2040. So urban population was growing, and with that also urbanization. Now, also, what was then happening, despite the rapid growth in urban population, the infrastructure was not growing at the same pace. So we saw an opportunity for us to really come in and democratize transport within the continent. At the same time, we also saw a huge penetration of mobile phone usage and internet. Yeah, I think one of our speakers today told us penetration is not the issue, usage was actually growing. So therefore, that was a good opportunity for us to convert these people into ride-hailing. For those of us conversant with ride-hailing, it requires internet and mobile phone usage. The other thing that was happening at the time is high levels of unemployment, which still persist. In Africa, I'm told the levels of unemployment are between 80 to 30%. So ride-hailing then was a good opportunity for these drivers to just have an opportunity to earn an income within their own terms. Yeah, so those were some of the things that were quite good opportunities for us to use then to step into Africa. Since we've been able to launch in 5 additional markets, and I'm quite excited to hear a number of the panelists talk about my markets. Tunisia, we're in Ghana, we're in Nigeria, we're in South Africa, we're also in East Africa, Kenya, and the Tanzania. So yeah, those are some of the things that we sort of leveraged on in the beginning.
Super, and I think like everything that you're mentioning in terms of data, I think Aziza, you've seen it all in the African market. Is there a different way that you need to look at data or things to keep in mind when you're looking at data on the continent that we can share?
Yeah. So actually, exactly what you said, Hannah, at the beginning. When we speak about Africa, we need to remember that it's a continent, and we are speaking about 54 countries on the continent, and each country has its own specificities. And I think when a startup is considering an expansion to the African market, it is very important to make sure that you do the homework, as we say, like that you look at the data, see if there is a market there, if there is an interest in the market. Like I think this is what Bolt, like Caroline from Bolt has been referring to. It's very important to also be aware of the consumer behavior when it comes to also the readiness of the market. Does it have the infrastructure needed? Caroline mentioned the internet penetration, the mobile usage. So depending on the solution of the startup, I think there is some work that needs to be done prior to the expansion project in order to make sure that you minimize the risk and that you have a successful expansion. And this is kind of the things, one of the things that we do at Brighter. What we do is that we try to kind of assess the readiness of the markets in Africa specifically, and it could be like a useful tool for startups considering expansion.
I think a lot of the times too, what startups run into challenges of is building these local partnerships and finding these local providers of services to help them to understand and to analyze that data that companies like you are providing. So
exactly, I think also considering having a local partner or a local representation actually on the markets that you are going to enter is very important, because having a local person or a local partner in general can help you to minimize the risk, because they know the market, they are on the ground, they can interact more easily, etc. So I think also having or considering a local partnership is also key to also when exploring the expansion for a startup in Africa.
And Chetty, when you're coaching CEOs, do you tell them, is there any markets particularly that you warn them are more challenging than others, or is it always very specific to the businesses that they're bringing? Or
yeah, I mean, when you think about it, you said 54 countries, right? 54 administrations, 54 regulatory environments, 54. I mean, you're talking all kinds of languages, right? So ultimately, what problem are you looking to solve, right? I mean, you can't control C and then control V on a continent. And even, you know, one of the most powerful startups or startup stories in Africa, M-Pesa, they couldn't do a control C from Kenya to the next country. They actually learned the very hard way that that doesn't work. So, you know, if you're trying to do that, right, and just come to Africa and just say, okay, we're going to go to that country. I always kind of get down to, you know, do the work, do the discovery work. Right? I'm a product guy, so get yourself immersed, do something, run an experiment, find out where you need to go. And then you go there and use the data to determine, okay, is this the right place for us to do this? Are these problems? Do these people have our problems, right? Because many times you think they have the same problem, they don't, right? And so that is a key conversation that I have with these folks, is to say, okay, get the discovery work. And look, Bolts is Bolts. I mean, one of the per capita unicorns in Estonia, as you like to remind us all the time, right?
We're very proud.
And
we are
very proud, right? But the thing is, Bolts, you know, very well funded, very well managed, and you came to Africa and you did all that work. Not everybody has that luxury, okay? And, you know, again, you talk about local partners, they are struggling to be able to even do that kind of work, right? So I think that the council has always been discovery. You do discovery on the problem, you understand the market, but also understand who are the local partners, right, that can help you. Because, not everybody's Bolt, not everybody's Wise, right? Not everybody's Skype. There are folks who are, you know, trying to just figure it out. And so the council is always, bottom line, what's the value prop? Are you really trying to solve a problem that they have? Right?
I think it's a great segue into the next portion, which is talking about the success stories. You know, you mentioned Bolts, of course. I'm going to mention it again, but I think Africa as a continent has 7 homegrown unicorns. So this is fantastic. It's something that I think, Caleb, you know, through your reporting, obviously you know a lot about these success stories. But I think how do we take the experiences of these success stories, both the domestic and also the ones that are coming in from abroad, and how do we leverage this to build more amazing and incredible startups?
Yeah, totally. So I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit.
Do we have mic for Caleb?
Hello, testing.
Oh.
Yeah, Caleb is not supposed to speak. So
used to be.
We cut him off. We took him out.
Can everyone hear me anyway? At the back?
Maybe not.
They can't.
Yeah.
Can you hear me at the back, or? Yeah, you can. All right.
Ah, okay,
we'll
good.
Continue and then hopefully the mic.
I think the mic is coming to you.
Okay.
But maybe I'll jump over to Chetty first then, because Chetty's also been dealing with success stories. And does the Bolt story help? Does the unicorn chasing help? Or does more need to be done in the continent to actually support these locally grown businesses and get things started?
Yeah, so, you know, look, Bolts is Bolts. Bolt is not an African unicorn, right? It's an Estonian unicorn. And so to the extent that Bolt is successful in doing what it's doing, I know, Caroline, I don't know if we're piling on you or if we're not. We'll see by the end of this if you're still speaking to me, right? But the challenge with unicorns and trying to, you know, build these unicorns. And remember, unicorns are based on valuation, right? They're not revenue companies. So that means that maybe they've raised a whole bunch of money. You know, Bolt is showing that Bolt has revenue. They actually have a bottom line that is sustainable and that allows them to do business over there. The challenge is that 7 unicorns, you know, in Africa, and then that becomes a metric that is used to determine how hard or how easy it is to do business in Africa. Meanwhile, there's, you know, Caleb will tell you, there are a lot of companies that are doing very well in Africa. They're not unicorns, right? What they are is that they're solving real problems. And to the extent that some of them have avoided going after the VC money, there's advantages to that, right? And then there's some who got the VC money and imploded, right? And they imploded because, you know, there's this saying that success is not because of starvation, it's because of gluttony, right? And so we want to make sure that our startups are not chasing funding or chasing unicorn status just to say we have unicorns. We want Wises, we want Bolts, we want Skypes. We want companies that are actually doing real good. And so, you know, I think chasing unicorns, I am not a big believer, right, in the unicorn status. I'm a big believer in we're making money, we're hiring people, we're solving problems, wicked problems. Africa, we are wicked problem central, right? Wicked problem central. So come and solve problems. Don't come there trying to get yourself a market that will now give you unicorn status, right? You get money and you get a valuation. I think that starts to become a challenge for many of us.
Solving real problems. I think that's a great way to just start by assessing the people that are coming in and what they want to do. Caleb, do you want to jump back on success stories?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Chidi makes a great point. Like, we always point to the number of unicorns we have in a country. I did a post on Estonia, like arriving in Estonia yesterday, and I was talking about how it's a tech country, and I think is it 10 unicorns in Estonia
10
today? 10?
I think the last time we checked.
Yeah, which it could be 11 now, to be honest. But you know, that's a great metric, right? Like 10 companies worth $1 billion. But I think on the continent, across Africa, and just generally, like, value is not an indicator of like true money being made or true returns. And I think going a step deeper, like, it's not just like are we making money or are we hiring more people? It's like, are we returning that money? And I think that to me is the like sort of hallmark of like an ecosystem that works. And we have a lot of unicorns. We have 7 unicorns, but not as many exits. And that's what I hope that we're going to see a lot more of in the next like 3 to 5 years, especially as funding dries up and its appetite kind of like, is a bit more skeptical about the continent. An example of this going well is a pretty well-known story across the continent, Paystack. Paystack, and it also ties into this idea of like launching with local partners. So Paystack is a payments company, allows e-commerce companies to transact. Payments are just such a nightmare across the continent, especially, I found it tough in Nigeria as well, like making international payments. And so like they allowed merchants to accept payments globally. And Stripe, which is the biggest payment company in the world, or like the biggest payment company in the US, invested in Paystack to have a local partner to see how they operated. Paystack goes out to raise a Series B, and instead they get an acquisition offer from Stripe for $200 million. That's like a great example of a company working with a local partner to enable them, give them expertise, and then actually acquire them, take the next step. But then what it does for our ecosystem is it means that now all of the employees of Stripe have money, and so they're investing in other startups, their friends' startups. We now have like, I don't know if there's an Estonia mafia or like a Skype mafia, but we have a Paystack mafia, which is just all the founders that have gone on to build amazing companies that are growing, and they all sort of invest in each other. They get their first checks from their employees, and also a lot of the angel investors and VCs that invested in Paystack have now gone on to invest in way more companies. Like, there were so many more angels after 2020 investing back into Nigeria. And so I think these are sort of the success stories we need, where people actually get their dollars back and they keep investing in the ecosystem. And also where global companies, like, we want to invest in these companies to see them grow as well. So I think that's a great success story on sort of all levels.
I think that's some of the exciting things we've seen starting to come out of Bolt, is that we have some of our former country managers that are now launching their own businesses on the continent and doing incredible things. And we're still formerly Bolt, not Weir anymore. They're still doing fantastic things, but also former team members are now starting to build that mafia presence, and it's expanding. Carolyn, like, maybe you can tell some of these success stories, or one really good one that you've had in the last year with launching a market or with growing a market or overcoming a challenge that you faced in a new space.
Okay, and maybe I'll also just use that to share some of why Bolt is where it is today, at least in Africa. What we've tried to do is use our local solutions, but to address local challenges, which I think has been a consistent theme throughout the day-to-day. How do you use the existing products to address local challenges? When we first launched in 2016, across most of our African markets, they are cash-based economies. Now imagine if when we launched, we went and introduced Bolt, but payment using a card system. Would never be where we are today. So what we did is revolutionize payment. We allowed our riders and our drivers to actually use a cash-based system that had largely been ignored by some of our competitors. So that gave us an edge. So speaking to localization of the existing challenges that the riders or the community is facing, but then it just doesn't stop there. You have to continuously innovate to tap into this. Once we had launched and now we were full cash-based, what happened? M-Pesa hit the world. So if we had limited our payment options to cash, that means you're locking out quite a number of users on the platform. So it's figuring out what's happening, but then continuously innovating. Then along the way, yes, we had good mobile penetration and good internet but the usage was very low. Again, our drivers need internet, they need phones. So we had to actually partner with some of the mobile manufacturers to ensure that the phone that the drivers are using, they actually can log on to the app. Partnerships, again, that enable them to be able to get data packages at good prices. Yeah, so it's not one-stop, one innovation that fits all. Again, another example, sorry, I'm using quite a number of examples, but just, to bring it home. In East Africa, those from Kenya and Tanzania, you find that a lot of the riders use something we call motorbikes, borders, yeah? In Europe, ride-hailing was a four-wheeler opportunity. We then had to open up to two-wheelers. There were concerns around safety. So what did we do? Make sure that the same way we vet the drivers for the vehicles is the same way we are vetting the people operating borders. So it continues. And that again opened us to a segment that hadn't been tapped to globally. Now, recently and within the East Africa space, sustainability is a big thing. So what do? Advance it to the EV motorbikes. But initially, they're very expensive. Again, partnerships with manufacturers, with financiers to bring the cost down. So I think if I was to summarize the bold success story, our product, but localization to address the local challenges. Is it one-off? Absolutely no. There's a challenge every other day. How do we innovate to address that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it sounds like you've hit all of those problem points right on to really actually solve real issues, like you're saying. So.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think that transitions us into talking about challenges. And I think when I think about expansion, and I remember my expansion days as well, localization and bringing a European company into the African continent comes with a lot of challenges. It comes with regulatory challenges. It comes with social challenges. I mean, often you're bringing an HQ-based support team down into multiple markets simultaneously, and you run into cultural clashes and challenges of communication. And I'm just wondering, for teams, what is the best way to approach this? How do we try and harmoniously expand our businesses and build culture that's going to be synonymous with what we were starting on the European continent if we're going into African markets? Maybe Chetty, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
I was writing, please don't ask me.
It's not an easy one.
Oh, and by the way, I had no idea I was wearing Estonia's colors. Like literally, I just put them on and I'm looking at her and I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell? So Daniel, I don't know what you did to me, but so that's a good question. Doing business in Africa is hard. And I don't say that because it's Africa. Doing business is hard, but doing business in Africa is hard, right? And again, we've kind of talked about how it's a fragmented market, period. I'm sure, Caroline could speak to this. It's a fragmented market. Doing business is hard, but you can't look at Africa as incremental. A lot of folks look at Africa as incremental to their bottom line. You know what? We're just going to go expand over there. And what that does, you kind of get knee-jerky. If things start to kind of look wishy-washy, especially you see what our VCs are doing, the foreign VCs have essentially kind of repatriated from Africa because of what you would call the global kind of financial crisis. And that's an incremental kind of mindset. It has to be fundamental. You have to look at it both, right? As a fundamental part of your business. Once you do that, it allows you to really think about how you expand, how you attack the market, even when the challenges come, right? And so, when things are hard, at the C level, you start to see, and I say any CFOs in the room, I'm pointing at you, when you start crunching your numbers, using Aziza's data, start crunching numbers, Africa's looking kind of freaky, and then you start running away. No, this is a long-term play. You are here to play. And if you show that long-term commitment to the continent, we are on your side. We will back you. The public sector will back you. The citizens will back you, right? But if there's that wishy-washy kind of, things are looking kind of funky, so we're going to withdraw from this market, or we're going to pull our team from that market. Microsoft, and they're not a startup. I know. They used to be, but, they just essentially eliminated their, Africa Development Center in Lagos. Everybody is gone, right? That is kind of a wishy-washy kind of approach to things. We're looking for startups. We're looking for companies that are coming on the continent, and we see, they see the continent as fundamental. So that starts to kind of bring more success. But there are challenges, and those challenges you have to address them head on as opposed to trying to run away from them.
It sounds like they've left a lot of really good talent on the table, though.
So if anybody's looking, I know people, I know all of them. Okay, I don't know all of them, but I know many of them. There are a lot of people who are ready to come and do some hard work. So, let them know.
Super. Yeah. On that, I think what is key when we speak about expansion for Africa specifically, because as Shidi said, like working in Africa and building and doing business in Africa can be challenging. So the idea is making sure that the product is relevant actually for the market, and making sure that you also have on the back of your mind that you are going to adapt. Exactly what Caroline has pointed out in terms of, for example, the payment method that they have adapted based on the method, like payment method that the population is using. For example, in Tunisia, unfortunately, until now, we are very like cash-based like economy in general, but it's starting to shift. But like, for example, Bolt is available with that payment method. So making sure that the product is relevant for the market you're expanding to, taking the time to adapt, being consistent, also making sure that you are on the ground, but consistently adapting, innovating, being like knowing how the market that you are now expanding to is evolving and adjusting your product accordingly. So yeah, relevance, being on the ground, and consistency, because I believe that it takes time. And when you are willing to do business in Africa, you need to be ready for it, and you really need to want to, actually. You don't have to perceive Africa as just like a big consumer base. Like, you really need to think about the impact, actually. What impact am I going to generate when expanding? Am I going to create more jobs? Am I going to, like the impact metric and the impact factor is super important also to consider when expanding.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, I think like you obviously have this HQ based here in Estonia, but you're also running an HQ out of Kenya for the continent. How are the people working? How do you make sure that everybody is working together and harmoniously? And maybe you can touch a little bit on this talent side and how we build teams.
Okay. So again, the keyword localization. So there's a lot that we borrow from the HQ. But how do we then localize it to the Kenyan context? But also culturally, people are very different, in terms of male gender balance. Yeah. So just adapting to that localization has helped us. And what you also find within the African context as well, we have a lot of female empowerment. So if I look at my Africa leadership globally as Bolt, I think 42% of our leaders are female. Now, in Africa, it's slightly higher, just taking into consideration the high levels of female empowerment, that is happening on the ground. But I just want also to touch on a question that you asked, and I feel I should give an answer to, on the challenges of operating, within the continent. As you said, it's Africa is not for the faint-hearted, but it's something that you invest in long term. One of the things when we were expanding into ride-hailing that we faced is really around regulation. And I want to look at regulation on a two-pronged approach. First, it was a challenge because ride-hailing hadn't existed. And whenever we tried to operate, the governments would equate us to taxis. We're like, no, we're not taxis. We're ride-hailing. So it was very difficult. And also, when governments don't, and I say this in the most polite way, when governments don't know what to do with a sector, they tend to be reactive. And some of the legislation they'll pass will be prohibitive to industry. So that's why I say then the absence of regulation then created an opportunity for us to then now partner with governments and begin to define this is what the ride-hailing regulations should look like. Yeah, it's still a journey that we are on. So that then they begin to see us as partners. They're already seeing us, but how do we take it beyond legislation that you use for revenue making, but legislation that you also use to drive infrastructure development? You can imagine as Bolt, the amount of mobility going across. Yeah, so in a day we have about 1 million rides in Africa. You can imagine if we shared that data with government, what sort of information that you would use to drive infrastructure development. Yeah, so regulation, didn't exist in the beginning. Now we are beginning to work together to then shape how the future then looks like.
And I'm guessing it's a lot of your local team on the ground is building those relationships with government, but then you're going back to your Estonian HQ as well and having to coordinate. So it's a lot of working between people, and I can imagine it keeps you busy.
Can I very quickly say something? So is the Bolt case is very interesting because another conversation you should have is, even when your product is there are behaviors that your product inadvertently would encourage. And I'm sure you probably know where I'm going. In Nigeria, when I use Bolt, it's actually become a communication service as opposed to a ride-hailing service. Because what happens is I get a Bolt, and then the person calls me and is like, dude, I don't want to use the app, right? You could just show up, pay me $20, and we can go where we need to go. I see the Bolt people rolling their eyes because I know there's an issue. But that, I think that's an opportunity. I don't think there's an opportunity there. You might want to stamp it out, but there's an opportunity. I don't know what that opportunity is, or let me say this, I do, but you're gonna have to pay me so I can tell you guys what it is. But that's also part of the challenge, is you come in thinking you're solving one problem, then you create a new problem, and are you interested in solving that problem, or do you think it's prohibitive, right, to your bottom line? So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Caroline, do you want me to bounce that back to you, or Caleb?
Let me add to that. I think that is really interesting on user behavior and what happens when you actually bring a product or launch a product on the continent, and what you think people will take out of it versus what they will. Has anyone here heard of M-Pesa in Kenya? Hand up. Cool. Okay, cool, great. So M-Pesa is mobile money. It's the first success story, major success story of mobile money. It's how I pay for everything in Kenya, and it now has 55 million users, so just massive scale. But when it started, it was used as a way for people to access financing. So it was mostly loans. So how do you access financing in rural areas? Through airtime, so actually mobile credit. But what they found was people were oh, actually I can send money to my family up north, without having to physically give them cash. And they found that they had basically stumbled on this, penicillin for fintech. They had people moving money like crazy, just rapidly through airtime. And so they actually stumbled on this use case of mobile money rather than trying to invent it. So something really interesting things happen when you bring a product to a new market like that. Maybe not understanding the use case, but just testing, and then adapting to that as well as you're launching.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come right back to you because I had my next question was for you as well. But I think when we're talking about challenges, building trust and brand awareness is something that's very different on the African continent versus in other markets. And working at Tech Safari and promoting the companies that are in the market, what recommendations do you have for them? How do they kind of tap into what makes consumers comfortable with services or what's different?
Yeah. I think that exists on a lot of levels. So how do you make a consumer comfortable with your service, product, etc., versus how do you so actually a lot of the companies I work with are startups, and they're startups that are sort of seed stage to growth stage. Or they might be more established companies that want to expand onto the continent, so say Nigeria, Kenya. The first way, which is how do you make global companies seem credible and valid, is it actually is a local partner. In a lot of cases, we work with companies, some here, others across Europe, that want to expand, but they want to do it locally with someone who's on the ground, who has trust, who's built community. We have done that at Tech Safari just through fairly engaging content that tells people about what's happening and is kind of a resource for the ecosystem. So I think partnering with a local partner that is credible is sort of step one. But I think the interesting thing, and probably the lesson that's a bit harder to get, is if you're a startup building in Africa, on the continent, a place where generally you will eventually need global capital to expand. There really isn't enough capital to go to become a massive outcome within Africa, and so you need to go global. Now, how do you go global when most of the investors that would invest in you don't actually get it, or they're instantly just they're not really there. They're looking at their own markets, their home markets, and so that to me is kind of the challenge that I think local founders need to embrace, which is how do I actually tell my story globally from day one? And how do I communicate that globally from day one, and sort of build trust? And I think a lot of that comes down to just being open about the work you're doing, building those relationships early. I mean, there is this whole thing of like build, locally, solve a problem. That's true. But you should also be looking at how do you communicate that globally. I think that's essential if we want to expand and we want to actually capture that capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Caleb is doing a great job with that, right? I mean, Caleb's newsletter tells some really great stories. The other newsletters, Meka Jene, who does the same kind of work, please, subscribe to these newsletters. Talk to these guys. Talk to myself. Talk to Ambassador Daniel. There are folks who are actually kind of doing this work and know what's going on. We are, I'm battle tested. I have a company that failed on the continent. And that in of itself, I have data that many of you will never have, right? Especially, how to pay your bills when you don't have any money. And so, it's a very important thing to make sure that you tap into these environments, understand what's going on, keep your ears on the ground, right? And kind of get away from the mythology, right? Because there's a lot of mythology. Even on the continent, Nigeria is a place to go. Why? Because we have 250 million people. Meanwhile, Rwanda that has maybe 8 million, we don't want to do business. Meanwhile, Rwanda has one of the most robust platforms for you to build a product, right? If you want to build a product, you go to Rwanda, they see themselves as what they call experiment capital or the testing capital. If you want to build an MVP because they have the power, the infrastructure, they have an administration that is very interested, right, in you coming there and doing the work. They're actually quite wide open, right, in terms of doing business. So that's how you get your story out there. And so that would be my encouragement, right? Kind of talk to the right people and pay them too. So that's the other thing. No, seriously, there's a tendency for kind of advisory roles and all these, and then you kind of find out that it's just like a ceremonial role, right? And I'm going rogue on you. She said, don't go rogue on me. I'm going rogue. It's a ceremonial role. No. We're just as badass as anybody else out there. So bring, folks in to help you, but also pay them their value so that they actually can bring, because you'll see, you'll get half-assed work if you decide not to pay people or to give them the value that they bring to the table.
And I would say, also, if you're working with a local partner to launch your product, service, etc., on the continent, you want them to be bought in. You really want them to be on board with you, aligned to your mission. And yeah, obviously part of that is getting them on board, but a lot of that is also just paying them what they're worth. And I think I've heard of a lot of companies that have tried launching globally, in Kenya, Nigeria, but it's been half-assed because they've just been hey, can you help us out? Rather than this is actually a partnership. And I think that's where it comes down to finding the right partner, trusting them, but also really investing into that relationship and doing it for the long haul. Not just running a sort of short experiment to test out Africa.
Mm-hmm. I think the cost of talent is often one of these things that we forget on our expansion checklists. Actually, Caleb and I had a great conversation about the expansion checklist and process and how do you really consider which markets to go into. And I think you look at the size of a market, often the very first thing people say is, oh, look at the population size. That's our business opportunity. This, you couldn't be more wrong. I think anyone who's done an expansion in the room is shaking their heads because you need to be solving a problem and you need to know which people have that problem and then all the other variables that are going into things. So I think maybe from the data standpoint, how do we tell us more about the data on the market that we can be accessing or that we should be accessing, but besides just population sizes.
Yes. So actually, I agree with what Chidi said when it comes to staying up to date and hearing and reading about what's happening in the ecosystem. I mean, there is a lot of newsletter. I think Tech Safari is a great one that definitely need to be checked. Also, what we do at Brighter is we have a platform actually called Brighter Intelligence, which provides data that tracks investment deal flow on the African continent. So actually, when you log in, you can basically see the funding flow, the fundraising actually for startups based on the sector by year, etc. And it gives you an idea of the dynamics of the ecosystem. We also have a newsletter called Brighter Eye. It's a monthly newsletter actually, and it gives you updates on the state of innovation investment in Africa and what are the top sectors, what are the most active investors, and it kind of gives you an idea about, as I said, the dynamic, the activity of the ecosystem. But I think also looking at the macroeconomic data is super important when expanding, because like you need to understand, like for example, if we take the Bolt as an example of a startup who expanded, I think also one of the things that needs to be checked is, are there any competitors on the market that I'm going to expand to? So also the competition analysis and understanding who's already operating, who's already already starting to solve this problem. Can we think more of a partnership, or maybe investing and then acquiring, like Uber and Careem, for example, in Egypt? So I think there is a lot of ways to navigate, but data remains, I think, one of the biggest starting points that needs to be thought of when considering an expansion project.
Yeah.
So macroeconomic, but also understanding the dynamic of the market.
Actually, you just introduced me to the Brighter platform yesterday. It's fantastic. It's, as an expansion manager, it's something I would have liked to have had my hands on back in the day.
And actually, it's there is a freemium version, it's accessible to everyone, and I advise everyone, if you really want to make sense of what's happening in the ecosystem, you can just go to Brighter Intelligence, create an account, and it's easy for free, the first version. So yeah.
Chetty, I think you're going to like this one, but I used to say to my team that there's data for good and data for evil. And when it comes to making a business case, people are always going to collect what they want to make the business case they want to see.
Absolutely.
How do you kind of direct CEOs to be really staying focused on solving the problem and focused on actually looking for the market where they can best make their solution, rather than maybe where their personal interests are coming into play?
Yeah, so, if you're looking at Africa and you say, okay, I need to build a go-to-market strategy, right? Then that's where you start to see people get into trouble. Because you're looking at her data and you're saying, Nigeria or Kenya, South Africa. In fact, remember when the only country that was getting all the business was South Africa, right? Because of whatever data was out there, and everything pointed to South Africa, right? And so I say, look, put the go-to-market strategies to the table for now. And let's kind of get into real kind of product management principles, which is, what problem are we solving? I mean, I think all of us on this stage agree. What problems are we solving? And where do those problems, where are they more acute? Or let's say, what environments give us the best opportunity to find out whether this is a problem we should be solving, as opposed to deploying a solution that's looking for a problem, right? And I know that's cliche, but that's true. A lot of solutions come on the continent looking for problems to solve. And so I think that the council, as a coach or as a consultant, is let's just figure out whether, just go there, go somewhere and run some experiments, right? Don't make any big noises. Shoot. You could even go undercover as, if you're a Bolt, you go there and say, our name is Freeze or something, I don't know. And, you say Freeze, or just some little thing, and you see whether that works out for you. Or you use local partners, right? You use a local partner to run some experiments, right? And they don't have to cost you a whole bunch of money, so that if they fail, your reaction isn't, Africa's too hard, we're out, right? Your reaction is, okay, we learned some really cool things, so we're going to, cliche, pivot, or we will figure out something else to do, or, we build a communication system called Bolt Communications for taxi drivers to communicate with riders, right?
I think we're getting into a product pitch now.
I know. Bolt, I'm right here. So that would be my counsel.
Super. Anybody else want to touch on data for good, data for evil, and thinking how to use it to move your business? Okay. We're dated out. We've got 15 minutes left. I think I would like to give the panel the opportunity to talk a little bit about the future and what the biggest trends are that we're seeing for tech in Africa going into 2025, and what kind of opportunities are being presented. Now, you don't have to give away all of your ideas now. I think maybe some of them we want to save in, but what are we seeing, and what's exciting for us? And I think maybe we'll start at this end this time and go down the other way.
Okay, so look, this is amazing that this panel talked for almost 45 minutes. We didn't mention AI, right? So give us credit. You give us credit, right? So AI is very interesting. I've always been kind of not a skeptic, but more of a pragmatist on AI. I like all the energy that I see, but just like electric vehicles in Lagos, Nigeria, which doesn't make any sense, right? First, the roads, we're trying to get the roads to work, and then there's barely any power, So, there's a picture of a Tesla with a generator on the top driving, right? So that's that's the kind of stories that you see. So AI for me kind of has some of that. I think that it's, the trend is African governments, the public sector, and the private sector will come together and be like, okay, you know, we need to slow down because there's way too much AI coming at us right now. There's just too many people talking about this. We need to put some governance in place to allow startups who want to come and do AI from abroad and on the continent, or those who are partnering, or those who are local. I think that the AI conversation is going to become a lot more nuanced, as opposed to kind of this rush. It was almost like crypto three years ago on the continent. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. On the continent, it was crazy. And the same thing is starting to happen again. And I think that what I'm seeing is there's a lucid, I think Justina on the panel before, I think the second panel, she said that, you know, AI for creation, not AI for destruction. I think you're going to start to see governments get a little bit more lucid about that. I'm seeing that in Rwanda, I'm seeing that in Zambia. And so I think that's a trend that I would like to see continue.
I think that's a great point, and I think we're all operators on the panel, and so for us it's more about enabling us to do better work, not replacing and not, you know, trying to find a solution for everything.
For me, I'd say maybe fostering more these bridges that we are starting to create actually across the continent with the work that, for example, Smart Africa is doing, also AfriLabs when it comes to the hubs and other networks and entities. I think it's super important to create these spaces where people convene, discuss. I think this is where partnership starts, and maybe also our event today, like the Africa Business Forum, is a great opportunity also to foster and build and strengthen the bridge that Estonia is supporting actually with the African continent. So this is, I think, a lot can happen if we can keep creating these spaces to foster these partnerships and collaborations. But for Africa and from a funding perspective, actually, what I am personally excited about is seeing more funding going to AgTech startup and supporting the agriculture sector because of like food insecurity is a big challenge for the continent. And in the previous years, we didn't see a lot of funding going into AgTech solutions. And in the recently, we are seeing an increase of interest when it comes to supporting AgTech. And personally, I'm super excited about that because I think they are solving a real problem on the continent. And yeah.
If I just one other industry that I'm excited about is the creative industry on the continent. I can't believe I was on stage and I didn't speak about that because that's my
speak. We have time.
So the creative industry on the continent is on fire. So if there are any, you know, if you're thinking about that, that's an environment that you want to be in on now, right? They are doing some really incredible things. In fact, the Paystack story that Caleb was talking about actually has a creative angle because there was a big movie that came out on Netflix called The Black Book, a Nigerian movie, won a whole bunch of awards, just a lot of accolades, and it was funded, right, by two Paystack co-founders, right, and other tech people. So that money that came from Stripe found its way into the creative industry, and we're starting to see some serious energy around that. So just like the ag tech, you know, environment, the creative and create tech environments are, please, man, if there's anybody doing that, come down. Let's make it happen because, you know, Africa is telling a story right now.
Let me build on that. I think creative industry in general is really exciting. Like we're seeing it in film and Nollywood, but we're also seeing it in music. Like if you look at our top 100 songs, like there's probably Burna Boy in there, there's probably like Rima in there, like a lot of these Afrobeat artists that are now global, like they're global superstars and they're selling out stadiums. So that's really exciting.
And none of them are Ghanaian. They're all Nigerian.
All Nigerian, right?
No, Tyler's from South Africa.
Okay,
Tyler. You guys surely know Tyler. I think one industry that is a little bit more techy that is also creative, that's very exciting, is gaming. Across the continent, like we have extremely high phone penetration. So we have like, obviously, you know, a lot of folks here would have Samsung, Galaxy, smart like iPhones. But we have kind of like low-end smartphones as well, which are very accessible, very cheap. You could like pay $50 and you have a lot of the functionality that you'd normally have on a Samsung. Now, like, because so many young people are growing up on the internet, cheap internet and accessible phones, there's kind of like this gaming market, it's almost like hyperactive, right? Like there's a lot more opportunity to build games, local mobile games for the continent. And there's a lot of like really interesting things you can do there. There's a company called Carry First, which develops games, has a gaming studio, a lot of smaller studios popping up. So I think gaming is also another really big industry that's just set to really grow as well. Personally, I'm really interested in platforms. So I think that there's a handful of platforms that have a lot of people in emerging markets, and WhatsApp is like a fantastic platform. So everyone communicates on WhatsApp. Actually, like, I kind of run my life on WhatsApp. Like, you organize, you're like the person who come clean your place on WhatsApp. Like, you organize things on WhatsApp. You can sell on WhatsApp. Businesses operate there. So, like, what startups are building for WhatsApp to build tooling, build services that exist there that allow for like e-commerce, or allow for knowledge transfer, or allow for education. There's a few very exciting startups in that space. I think that startups that build on WhatsApp have a really significant play. And then one broad one is that I think that our startup, there was this massive funding boom in 21, 22 that was just global like VC. And so Africa took a small percentage of that, 1 or 2% of the global funding. So it's kind of tiny. And that has had a that's seen a lot of new founders come into the game a couple of years ago. I think what we're seeing now is we're having this really big slowdown on VC funding, and that's probably a good thing, because we're seeing that like a lot of the founders who now go to build something, they're serious, they're focused, they see a real opportunity, and that they're not going in being like, here's my deck, can I have some money and get started? They're building by bootstrapping first. I think that's very healthy for our ecosystem. And it means we're going to see some like very real solutions, rather than a lot of startups that ultimately failed because they started because people wanted to be founders rather than solve a problem. So I'm really excited for the next 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be our glory years like the last 2 in terms of funding, but I think it's a very positive thing for the startup ecosystem on the continent.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Carolyn?
All right. So I'll talk about use cases, and just if I think about the future, and to what I think one of our secretaries to the cabinet was saying, you have as many use cases as there are hours in a day. So in the tech space, the companies that I see that will make it are the ones that tap into those use cases and create products for the different consumer customer profiles, but also localize them. And I keep going to localization, such that whatever works in Ghana may not necessarily really work in Nigeria. How do you leverage on the use case that is very particular to that specific country? Yeah, we break away from that Africa is one big country. Tap into the use cases and localize those solutions. Now, the use cases that are relevant today may not necessarily be the ones that will be relevant a few years down the line. So how do we evolve in a much faster way? And when I think about regulation, in some of the cases, we will have to work with our regulators to define what does the legislation look like, because it will be uncharted waters that they've never experienced. It's things that possibly we also haven't experienced. So instead of regulation acting as an inhibitor, it's a partnership between the private sector and the regulators to define what is the policy that enables that sector and the sector that we are talking about to thrive. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Folks, I think we've had a really informative and actually practical hour here with everybody on the stage. So if you could join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you to all of our speakers. I think Joel's going to come back and tell you about the breakout rooms. I hope that we will see you all in them.
Thank you very much. We'll give you some token. Then we can take a group photo. Then I'll give the instructions to the next sessions. Go ahead. Just give.
Does it have the security thing?
Yeah. This has the security thing.
Okay, just making sure.
Especially for Caleb. Caleb, there's something there that you need to be using every day for your chat. Please. You're about to be hacked, so that's something there for you. Special from Daniel for you. Have you done a group photo? Go ahead. Thank you very much. So, thank you. I think my LinkedIn post next week, someone said there are as many use cases as there are hours in a day. Did everyone take that one? Please post tomorrow morning. So there are words here that are floating quite heavily. So thank you. I think the next session is a breakout. So remember in the morning, I did a small exercise, which was put your hand up. Now this is where the hand up conversation comes in. In the breakout sessions, you'll be able to ask questions, you'll be able to interact a bit closer to the panelists, and just have that one-on-one kind of conversation. So listen to the next instructions very, very carefully. Every one of you has a badge, right? If you don't have a badge, then you're not supposed to be here, by the way. Eh? If you have a badge, if you check your badge, you have a color code, right? So either yellow, mine was digital societies. There's a blue, I think is, what was it? Blue was up. Yep, so you have digital societies, you have green tech, you have startups, and you have edtech. So there are 4 different rooms, which I'll ask you to identify as you go out. So when you walk out, so digital societies, if you're registered for it, you stay in this room. So it's digital societies. The staircase, as you came up, there's a room on the left. It's called Brussels. I think that's where we're going to have green tech. If you turn to your right, where there's a DJ, next there's a room called Berlin, which is going to be the EdTech room. And then in the corridor, there is startups. So if you've chosen any of those are the 4 rooms. There are guys who have been black with sort of like crew who can also direct you there. So this is the plan. We walk out, grab a coffee, 10 minutes, then we go into the rooms, okay? So you go into your room, listen to the conversation, and then, why do people leave when I say some stuff? Can we close the doors, please? So, this is the deal that I want to make with you, because we've had this deal with Daniel. So we've discussed with Daniel one thing. If you guys want to have a nice social networking session, then we have to finish punctually by 4:30. So by 4:30, we'll have set up the cocktail outside here. So 1 hour, 1.5 or 1:15 minutes for your breakouts. Then we will meet and close outside here. So have a coffee, and then let's go into the rooms, and we'll be back here at about 4:30. Thank you very much.